Welcome back to another Seg History video. And in this video, I'm going to be breaking down what occurred with Hurricane Laura, especially with its impacts, also with the track of the system throughout this entire life cycle from start to finish as well. But starting off, first and foremost, we're going to look into that track. Um, it began as a tropical depression very late on August 19th, 2020s, and this one was actually the earliest L storm on record, as usually with L storms, they usually form towards the latter part of September, maybe even early October, but with 2020, it was a record pace tropical storm year, and by the time we got to late August, we were already at the point where we had our L storm form, which beat out 2005, another record breaking year where we had quite a bit of tropical storm activity, but the L storm didn't form until around early September. But with 2020, the L storm happened in mid August, so quite an early storm on record for the Atlantic and overall for the entire season, too. Now, with the Hurricane Laura, it did turn to a tropical storm by the morning of Friday, August 21st, as it did gain some steam after getting some warm air sucked into the sky, which led to more of that rainfall developing and storm winds increasing with the system. But it did encounter a brief struggle as it did make its way into the Caribbean, especially by the 22nd. The storm had already bypassed the U.S. Virgin Islands. It hit Puerto Rico and made its way into the Dominican Republic by very late on August 22nd. And by the morning of the 23rd, it was already on its way out of the Dominican Republic. But notice the track has it, how it has it going right towards the U.S., which this was a consistent thing with Hurricane Laura, as unfortunately the National Hurricane Center was seeing this, but it did have it as a kind of a Category 1, Category 2 hurricane at first. You can see with the H's going towards the U.S. This is where it was at this point by Sunday, August 23rd of 2020. But the very next day, it became a little bit more concerning, as once Laura had brushed past the last island, well, country, such as Cuba, this is where we begin strengthening in the Atlantic Ocean. As with the islands themselves, they kind of inhibited the development of Tropical Storm Laura, as at the time, with the system moving over the islands, it kind of kept the system from developing even more, as tropical storms do hate land, which means that they don't form very well. But as soon as Laura did pass Cuba, though, this is where it would actually hit its stride and made it to strengthen like crazy. But notice the track, it does still have it going right towards Louisiana, kind of the same area as with the previous outlook, but by the morning of the 21st, Laura would officially become a Category 1 hurricane, so it would actually start to begin to rapidly strengthen. And notice the big M shape here in parts of the Atlantic. This represents major hurricane status, which is what the National Hurricane Center did see by this point in time. And by the next day, Hurricane Laura became a major Category 3 hurricane as it rapidly intensified throughout the course of the 25th, and by early the 26th, it was already at that state. And by landfall, very late on August 26th, Laura reached its peak at 150 miles per hour as a Category 4 hurricane. So definitely a monster hurricane making its way towards the Caribbean. Notice the area, it did have it still going right towards Louisiana at that time. In fact, unfortunately, not too long after that, very early on the morning of Thursday, August 21st, Hurricane Laura made landfall in Cameroon, Louisiana, with winds still at 150 miles per hour. So quite a strong hurricane hitting that area. Unfortunately, led to lots of flooding, downed power lines, trees were destroyed, homes were destroyed. It was pretty tragic. And following the landfall, the storm continued to make its pace up towards Arkansas. By 10 a.m. in the morning, it was still sitting at a Category 1 hurricane. So even though it was on land, it was still a hurricane at this point. But by very late in the day, it would rapidly decrease in strength, and by 10 p.m. on the same day, it would be downgraded to a tropical depression and eventually would die off as it did move its way towards Kentucky by the next day. Despite the map showing it becoming a post-tropical system by Sunday to the Monday following the system, it didn't actually materialize into that as it did kind of fall apart even before then. Now, like I mentioned before, this was the earliest L-storm on record to occur in the Atlantic Basin in any hurricane season, given the fact that 2020 had a lot of record-breaking storms, especially throughout the course of the season. Even by the time we got to November, we had reached Hurricane Iota, which is far off in the Greek letter alphabet, which means that we had over 30 tropical storm systems forming that year, and this is only the 12th storm to occur that year. And not only that, unfortunately, Hurricane Laura struck Louisiana 2 days before Katrina's 15-year anniversary, which was tragic as it happened on August 29, 2005, and the system struck very early on the morning of August 27th that year. So, fortunately, I'm sure people in Louisiana were already dreading the anniversary, and with this hurricane coming onshore, I'm sure it made things even worse for them, made things a lot harsher, and unfortunately, given this is also happening in the middle of very trying times in 2020. And not only that, unfortunately, this hurricane did end up sadly killing 80 people. 42 of those were on U.S. soil, and this did also cause over $40 billion in damages. So quite a heavily impactful hurricane impacting the U.S. and also the Caribbean as well, as they also got hit pretty badly by the storm too. And this one ended up being retired as a result of all the damage, as it was quite impactful and again was the costliest one and deadliest one to occur that year in 2020. Now, we did have another storm that was also going on at the same time. I'm sure a lot of you guys don't even remember this. We had Tropical Storm Marco that occurred not too long after Laura, as it did form a couple of days later from Laura. But despite it developing, this thing will be involved in a phenomenon called the Fujiwara effect. Now, with the Fujiwara effect, this is when we have two tropical storms near each other, kind of feeding off each other, and usually it ends with one storm being stronger and the other one dying off or becoming a lot weaker. And this is what happened with Marco, where both systems were fighting each other, and Laura ended up winning the fight, and Marco ended up being the weaker storm. And Marco itself ended up getting shoved towards land, as Marco was also headed towards the Gulf, but with it being a weaker storm, the system didn't really cause much damage. If anything, only brought a bit of rain, maybe a couple strong winds to Louisiana. But this was happening 2 days before Laura made landfall. So unfortunately, this was the precursor to what was already going to be a really bad hurricane for Louisiana. So they not only got one tropical storm system, but they got two within a week. And this was even followed by Hurricane Delta, not even a month later in October. And even past that, another system that occurred later on in October, Hurricane Zeta. All that occurred in a span of 2 months. So really a horrible year for Louisiana. And now looking at the damage, this is following Hurricane Laura. Can tell quite a bit of damage that occurred in some of these neighborhoods in that area. And even looking at this image, it looks as if an EF4 tornado destroyed the place. This is what, unfortunately, Category 4 hurricanes end up doing. They do bring a lot of damage and destroy a lot of property, and that's what occurred, unfortunately, following the system. And even you can see here a house flooded out in the middle of swamp waters even, and you can tell it's badly damaged from this hurricane. Really horrible news. Very, very tragic system to hit Louisiana, and fortunately, given the fact they saw four tropical storm systems hitting them in the same year, I'm sure that made things even worse. And even with Hurricane Ida that occurred next year, that one also made things even worse for them. So definitely a horrible situation for Louisiana. But either way, that's pretty much it for this video regarding Hurricane Laura. This is just to show you that, again, hurricanes have their story, and most of the time it's not good. But this is just to show you that to not let your guard down, especially these hurricanes, especially when they rapidly intensify, as any hurricane can become Laura, we can have another Katrina. Any of that can occur with any sort of storm system. But that is it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like if you enjoyed it. And if you want to see more of this content, don't forget to subscribe to always get updated on whenever I post a video on this channel. Have a great day and stay weather aware.